Hello everyone, my name is Cesar and welcome to the second version of the Endless ATC course, of the full course that I'm doing. This time is the elementary level. I don't want to stay too long here with the presentation, just I would like to remind you that if you don't have the pro version, I kindly recommend you to download it, otherwise this course is useless. If you want to download it, you can download it on Android or Windows. So let's go to the point. First of all, we're going to see the requirements that I put for you. Of course, you can do whatever you want. You can continue with this video if you want, but I consider that in this level we have more complex concepts. So you need a bit of preparation, and that preparation comes from having watched the beginner level video, which I completely uploaded in my YouTube channel. So if you didn't watch it yet, I recommend you to stop this video and to go to that video first, to have it a look, to understand the concepts better, and then you need to practice at least 5 hours in this airport that I put you here, which is Sydney Airport, Yankee Sierra Sierra Yankee. And from those 5 hours at least you need to demonstrate yourself that you were able to do sequences without any separation incident during 1 hour. Again, if you haven't done these two things, I completely recommend you to stop this video and to do them first, because I think that you're not fully prepared for this lesson. But you're free to do whatever you want, it's your choice, it's your time. Of course, I'm going to respect it. So let's have a look of what we're going to see today in the elementary level. At the end of this theoretical part, I'm going to show you the Endless ATC interface more in detail, because in the previous video I showed it to you, but more in a nutshell, the most important thing, the most crucial things. So today I'm going to show you the interface in detail and every configuration that you can put. Also, we're going to talk about departures and arrivals procedures, because we're talking about approach and departure. And today we're going to talk about departures as well, because in the previous lesson we were only handling arrivals, but from now on we're going to handle also departures. So we're going to explain them in detail. Also, we're going to talk about the minimum radar vector altitude, because it's a concept that is very important for the part of the approach control. And also we're going to talk about the influence of speed, because the speed is a very important thing to bear in mind when doing sequences and controlling in aviation in general. We're going to talk about altimetry, the different heights that we consider, and also the influence of the altitude of the plane on speed. At the end of this theoretical part, we're going to talk about prioritization, what is more important, which instruction is more important to give, and the most interesting thing in my opinion is going to be the basic separation techniques and the basic sequencing techniques. So welcome to the elementary level again. I hope that you enjoy it, and let's go to the point. To start with this presentation, I'm going to remind you the most important phases of the flight. Let's consider them 5. The first part of the flight, of course, is the takeoff and the initial climb, and this is mostly handled by tower, because as you remember, when the traffic departs from the airport, it starts to climb, and this is handled by the tower controller. Then it's transferred to the approach controller or the departure controller in case that is a very big airport, and the traffic starts its climb. And then it reaches to the cruise altitude, where basically they don't change the altitude, they remain the same altitude until it reaches the point where they need to descend again to the airport of destination, and this is handled again by approach controller. Of course, the cruise altitude was handled by center controller, and the flight ends with the final approach to the ILS and the landing on the runway. Of course, it doesn't have to be the ILS, it can be another approach method, but in this Endless ATC course, we bear in mind the ILS always. So, which are the departure phase and arrival phase in all those stages of the flight? So, departure is usually considered when the plane starts to run for the climb and part of the climb phase, not all the climb phase, because the departure is just the fact of departing from the airport, and the arrival is mostly the same, but at the very late phase. It's not considered the arrival, it's considered the approach. That's why the arrival is considered at the middle of the descent and just before the final approach and landing phase. So let's talk about altimetry. Let's talk about height. Let's talk about the vertical distance. Let's talk about units. So how is the altimetry? How are the heights measured in aviation? Of course, maybe you already know it from the previous video, but when we talk about vertical distance, we're talking about feet. The feet is the standard unit for measuring the vertical distance, and I will show you the conversion here. Approximately 1 meter is 3 feet. So let's say that, for example, the plane is at 2,000 feet. That means that it's approximately at 667 meters. The same happens with 7,000 feet. Approximately the plane is at 2,333 meters. And the same happens with 10,000 feet. But when we're talking about vertical distance, we usually confuse the terms, because there are 3 terms that are very known in this vertical distance. So let's talk about altitude, let's talk about height, and let's talk about elevation and what's the difference. The difference is mainly the 2 reference points where the distance is measured. And here you can see the example. You have 2 levels, the sea level and the ground level. I need to let you know that usually the ground level is above the sea level, unless you're in the Netherlands, of course. So if you're not in the Netherlands, usually the sea level is below the ground level. So let's see these 3 distances. As you can see, there are different references. Here is the sea level and the ground level, here is the ground level and the plane, and here the sea level and the plane. So when we're talking about elevation, we're talking between the distance between the sea level and the ground level. When we're talking about height, we are talking about the distance between the ground level and the plane. And when we're talking about altitude, and I highlighted the altitude because this is the term that we use in aviation more, and of course we're going to use this term when playing Endless ATC, is the distance between the sea level and the ground, the distance between the sea level and the plane. But also there are other terms when talking about the distance, and it's the altitude versus flight level, because how many times we have heard in the radio or something that the air traffic controllers, they are talking about flight levels and altitude. So what's the difference? The difference is how is measured the vertical distance. Here you have this instrument that is used by the plane, and it's called altimeter. And this basically takes as a reference the pressure that is at sea level in one determined area. For example, in this area, the QNH, which is the actual pressure, is 1020. That means that is 1020 hectopascals. And maybe you don't know it, maybe you know it, but as the higher you go in altitude, the less pressure, the less particles of air there is in the sky. So that means that always there is a difference of pressure from the sea level and the ground level, from the sea level and the plane, and that difference of pressure is used to measure the altitude. So when we bear in mind the QNH is the actual pressure of the sea level in one specific area. When we bear in mind the QNH is when we're talking about altitude, because it's a specific vertical distance that is between the plane and the sea level in one specific area of the world. When we're talking about flight level, we're talking about that the reference is 1013, which is the standard international pressure at sea level. But of course, the sea level is not always the same. That means that if you want to measure the altitude in one specific area, you need the actual pressure, and that actual pressure is the QNH. That's why when you're talking about altitude, usually you are at the lower levels, and you want to know the accurate altitude in order to not to have catastrophic outcomes. But when you're at higher altitudes, I'm going to show you better. When you're at higher altitudes, you have different places. For example, one plane is here and it's at London, and here this plane is in Manchester. Of course, the ground level is not always the same, but also the sea level is not the same in different points. That means that, for example, if someone from Manchester here has the reference that is the sea level here, for example, the sea level here pressure is 1014, and the sea level here, the pressure of the sea level here is 1016. That means that both planes, they're having different references, and even though they are at the same altitude, at the same flight level, they're going to have different altitudes in their cockpits, in their cabins. That's why when the planes, when they fly very high, they need to have the same reference in order to measure the same distance, the same vertical distance. So there's always a transition altitude, and that means that when the plane is flying up, when the plane is flying up and is crossing this line, they need to switch from the QNH to the QNE. And when the plane crosses this line, when they are descending, they need to switch from the QNE to the QNH of the place. So that's the reason why we're talking about different measures, for example, altitude and flight level. And let's see the difference. How do you express the altitude and how do you express the flight level? When you express in altitudes, you explain in thousands of feet. And when you explain the flight level, you explain it in hundreds. So the thing is that when there is a 10,000 feet distance, that means that you're at flight level 100. When you're at 21,000 feet, you're at flight level 210. And it's very important to know that when we're playing Endless ATC, we're always using flight levels, regardless of the altitude of the plane. But it was very interesting to explain you that there is a difference between altitude and flight level. Just again, when we're playing Endless ATC, we're always expressing the distance in flight levels. So let's talk about speed now. Very important concept. But before explaining the concept of the speeds, we need to know how the speeds are measured. And the standard is like in the international standard measure, the international standard unit, of the speed is the knot. And for those who are living in the United States, I also put the conversion in miles per hour. But approximately one knot is 1.8 kilometers per hour. That means that if the plane is flying at 180 knots, it's approximately 324 kilometers per hour. The same happens with 300 knots. The same happens with 420 knots. That's the conversion. Just to let you know, the international standard unit of the speed in aviation is the knot. So this very confusing concept. What are the different speeds and why we use different speeds in aviation? The reason is because there are different ways of measuring speed. Let's talk about the three most common, famous speeds, and we're going to talk when we use one and we use the other one. Let's start with the indicated airspeed, EAS. And what is the indicated airspeed? I put the logo here of Endless ATC because we use this speed when playing Endless ATC. And basically, the indicated airspeed is the speed that is measured by the plane here with this instrument that is called pitot tube. And basically, this instrument, it measures the amount of particles of air that enter through this tube. And with that, it calculates more or less what is the speed of the plane. But why is called indicated airspeed? Because it's the speed that you can only give to the pilot. Because the pilot has the speed reference here. So basically, it's not the actual speed of the plane, it's the speed that is measured by the cabin, by the plane in general. That's why you need to bear in mind that the speed that is measured by the plane is mostly not always the same speed that is the actual speed of the plane. That's why we have the true airspeed. But first, I need to summarize that the higher the altitude is of the plane, the lower the accuracy of the speed is measured by it. So that's why you have the true airspeed, because the true speed is not the same as indicated airspeed, it's the actual speed at which the plane is flying through the air. And how do you measure the true airspeed? So as the true airspeed, it depends on the altitude of the plane. You have this amazing formula, which is the indicated airspeed plus the altitude divided by 200. Of course, if we're talking about flight levels, it's the indicated airspeed plus the flight level divided by 2. But here we're not talking about flight level, so we just consider the true airspeed as the indicated airspeed plus the altitude divided by 200. And the third is the ground speed. Why do you have the true speed and the ground speed? Because one thing is basically the speed at which the plane is flying through the air, and then you have the speed at which the plane is flying in relation to the ground. So for example, when a plane is flying at 180 knots ground speed, that means that in relation to the ground, the plane is flying approximately at 340 kilometers per hour. So let's see what is the conversion here. When we're talking about ground speed, we're talking about the true speed, but you need to add the wind factor. And we're going to see one example here. I put the logo here because this is very relevant speed. And the reason why it's relevant is because when you're controlling in Endless ATC, in the screen you see the ground speed, you don't see the indicated airspeed. The indicated airspeed is the speed that you give to the plane, but the speed that you see on the radar is the ground speed. So let's see this example. This plane is flying at an altitude of 14,000 feet, flight level 140. It's flying at an indicated speed of 250 knots, but at this level, the wind is going against the plane at 25 knots. That means that the true airspeed, if you apply the formula, is 320 knots. As you can see, the plane has measured 250, but the plane is actually flying at 320. That's why it's very important to bear in mind that there are different speeds, because they are measured in a different way. And the ground speed is not the same as the true speed, because yeah, the plane is flying in this direction, but the wind is deviating the plane in this direction. So if you reduce the 25 knots to this true speed, you have the ground speed is 295. So in a nutshell, the plane is flying at 250 knots indicated, and this is the only speed that I can give to the pilot. I cannot give to the pilot fly at 295 knots. I need to give him 250. Actually, it's flying at 320 knots, but in relation to the ground, it's flying at 295 knots. Let's see another example here. You have two planes flying at the same indicated airspeed, but they are at different altitudes. More specifically, they are at 5,000 feet difference. So let's measure the actual speed that they are flying in relation to the ground. So again, they have the same indicated airspeed, but as you can see, the wind, of course, let's consider that the wind is the same at this level than at this level, because another thing is that the wind can blow at a different speed, at a different strength, in different levels. But for this example, let's consider that the wind is knocking at the doors, it's knocking at the planes at the same strength. Let's consider 5 knots. So 5 knots here, 5 knots here. If we apply the formulas, you can see that this plane is flying at 285 knots. and here is flying at 260 knots. So even though that this plane and this plane they're flying at the same indicated airspeed, actually this plane above is flying faster than this one in relation to the ground. So that's why it's very important to bear in mind the ground speed. Because if you want to maintain this separation, let's say that this separation is, I don't know, 5 nautical miles, okay? You have 6,000 feet and 3,000 feet. You want to maintain this separation. That means that you need to maintain the same ground speed, not the same indicated speed. You need to maintain the same ground speed in order to maintain the same distance, because we are having the distance in relation to the ground. So let's see this example. You need to maintain in both airplanes the ground speed of 200 knots. And for this example, again, let's consider that the wind is uniform. That means that the wind is 10 knots here and 10 knots here against the planes. So what is the indicated airspeed that you need to give to both planes in order to maintain the same ground speed? Here you have the example. If you apply the formulas, that means that to the plane that is flying higher, you need to give an indicated airspeed of 180 knots in order to maintain 200 knots ground speed. But to the traffic that is lower, you need to give an indicated airspeed of 195. So that's the example that I could give you. So let's switch to the departures and approach procedures. For this example, I designed this beautiful city, which of course it doesn't exist in reality. This is the main line. This city is called Hasselville, and you have a mountainous area here, another mountainous area here. This is the metropolitan area, this is the industrial area, and this is the rural area. Let's consider that this is the sea, and this is a lake, and this is the mainland, of course. You have one airport here. So let's talk about the standard instrument departure. The standard instrument departure is a predefined route that ensures that the traffic that are departing from the runway, they go to the first reference points, which in this case we will have 4. They have to first reference points in a safe and organized way. And why do we have these reference points? Because they are usually the first points of the route. So in this case, let's design this standard instrument departure for these runways. Let's consider that the traffics are flying out of the runway 05. Of course, I'm not going to explain the reason why the runway is 05. You can see it in the previous video. But in this case, when they are departing from the runway 05, it's very dangerous to turn directly to the left or to the right, because they are industrial areas and a mountainous area. So let's consider that when you're departing from the runway 05, you shouldn't turn left immediately or turn right immediately, because you're going to meet these areas. So of course the obvious path to follow is this part here, because that ensures that you're not meeting any of these areas. But from here, how do you fly directly to these points? As you don't know the performance of the plane, you don't know if after here there are enough height to turn left immediately and to avoid this industrial area. So let's first, at first instance, let's avoid these areas as well. So from here, if you want to fly to Riblo or Pans, it's very easy. You just fly towards these points. But let's say that you want to fly to Omnio and to Emisa, you still need to avoid these areas. So how do you do that? You just turn and fly over here and then go to the reference point. So that would be a reliable standard instrument departure from runway 05. Let's see the opposite example. If you're flying out of the runway 23, you need to bear in mind that you need to avoid these areas here for obvious reasons. But also, when you're flying and the planes are departing, the engines can make a lot of noise. That means that also, even though it's not completely prohibited, you need to avoid this rural area, because you could make a lot of noise and continuous departures would affect the locals. So let's define one path to follow that would avoid these areas. For example, here you have this example. Immediately after going out of runway 23, you turn immediately to the left. And then if you want to go to EMISA or Romeo, you just do like an arc here. And if you want to go to dribble or band, you just avoid this area by flying all straight and then do the turn and come here to go to dribble or bands. That would be a standard instrument departure for runway 23. So let's see the opposite. What is a standard arrival procedure? Of course, here we have the same city and the same reference point. Here we have another reference point, but it's irrelevant. Above one city, one part of one area of the world, we have airways. That means that at higher altitudes we have airways. They are paths that the planes are flying in order to arrive to their destinations. So as you can see, the points EMISA, Omni, Riblo, and Bands, they are part of an airway. So that means that probably if traffics are arriving to Hasselville, they're going to pass through one of these points. That's why they are the first reference points. So how do you arrive from the first reference points into the runway? So you can arrive via different ways. But let's see, for example, for runway 05, you have the ILS here. Of course, there are other methods to arrive to the runways, but in Endless ATC, we only use the ILS, so that's why we consider only the ILS. And how do you arrive to this runway? When arriving to runway 05, you need to avoid these areas, of course, because flying at high altitudes, it's safe, but at lower altitudes, it's not safe. So you need to define a path in order to arrive to the ILS, avoiding these areas. Those could be the standard arrival procedures. So for runway 05, it's very easy. You just do this arc. It's not completely an arc, but you know the path here to the ILS, and then coming from regular bands, they have a common reference point that then goes into this path, and then they join to the ILS, and from the ILS is just the final approach. And let's see for the opposite example. But first of all, let's talk about the possibility. Let's say that if the planes are not they cannot land because there is a problem in the runway, or the wind is too strong, or something. For any reason, they need to climb again. That's the missed approach procedure. They just need to follow this path, because remember, if you're departing from runway 05, you need to avoid these areas. And in order to complete another approach, it's easier to go through the sea and then to come to this more common path and then go again to the ILS. So that would be the missed approach procedure. But for the opposite example, runway 23, let's say that you want to arrive from the different reference point, it would be even much easier to arrive to runway 23. That means that if we have a more convenient standard procedure for departures in runway 23, and then we have a more convenient standard procedure for runway 23, that means that the preferential runway in this city would be the runway 23. And that would be the standard terminal arrival procedure. If you come from EMISA or Omni, you just come over here and then do this path in order to arrive to the ILS. If you come from Riblo, it's super easy, and if you come from Bands, it's easy as well. Of course, you need to be reminded that the altitude here is descending. And the most interesting thing, and the thing is that in Endless ATC, we're not doing standard procedures. We're just doing omnidirectional points. Of course, here the missed approach procedure would be that for obvious reasons. But let's talk about the omnidirectional departure or arrival. And this is what is used at Endless ATC, because we are just using vectors in order to approach the planes into a runway. So, in order to talk about omnidirectional arrival, we need to consider the dangers of the land. And how do you set boundaries? For example, you cannot fly over here at very low altitude, and you cannot fly here at very low altitude because it's a mountain. So there is a risk of the plane collapsing in the mountains. So let's talk about the minimum radar vectoring altitude, and it's the minimum altitude at which it's safe to give a vector to a plane. And what is the criteria in order to set one minimum radar vectoring altitude in one point of the city or the land or whatever? Are these criteria, and the criteria are that, for example, you need to have at least 1,000 feet distance from all obstacles, and obstacles we can consider anything, one tree, one skyline, everything that is not terrain is considered an obstacle. So you need to have at least 1,000 feet separation from all obstacles, and you have to have at least 2,000 feet separation from all the terrain. So according to this criteria, we're going to define the minimum radar vectoring altitudes for this city. So for that, we're going to set the highest point. The highest points are these. For example, it's safe to fly above 4,000 feet in both industrial areas. That means that anything that flies above 4,000 feet is safe. Here we have the maximum point here is 1,200 feet. The highest skyline here in the metropolitan area is 1,500 feet, and this highest point in this mountainous area is 2,000 feet. So let's apply this criteria in order to define the areas. But first, let's see what are the areas. What are the separation? How can we separate the areas? In this case, we can separate the areas like this. As you can see here, we have one area at which the point is 1,500, and you have other areas. So once you have the area set, and the reason why I don't put another area here is because the maximum point at this point is 17,000 feet, and this is irrelevant because it's basically at sea level mostly. So that's why I consider the same area here. So in order to apply this criteria, let's talk about these industrial areas. And the condition is that anything that flies above 4,000 feet is safe. That means that the minimum radar vectoring altitude here it should be 4,000 feet. But here, for example, the sea, as this is considered terrain and this is irrelevant, we can set here that the yellow area must have a MRVA of 2,000 feet. So in all the area of Hazardville, the lower point that is safe to fly is at 2,000 feet. But in these specific areas, the industrial areas, is 4,000 feet. And then let's separate from the terrain in this case. In this case, it's 2,000 feet the highest point, and here the highest point is 1,200 feet. That means that if you apply 2,000 feet of separation, you have this minimum radar vectoring altitudes. And to finish, you have this area, which is 1,500 feet. And the highest obstacle, because this is not terrain, is at this point. That means that if you apply 1,000 feet of separation, you have a minimum radar vectoring altitude of 2,500 feet. So in a nutshell, in this area, anything flying above 4,000 feet is safe, and at some points, you can descend a bit more. And of course, anything that is flying here above 2,000 feet is safe. If you have these areas, you can design other kind of departures and arrivals. For example, for departures, it's the same, but let's remind the non-preferential configuration, which was the runway 05, because it's very difficult to turn directly to left or to right. Let's say that you want to give a direct vector to Omnio or to EMISA or to Riblo or to Vans. So you can define an omnidirectional departure that after the traffic is departing from runway 05 and it reaches to this point, then after reaching to this point, they can fly directly to the points, because they will climb faster. So if they arrive to 4,000 feet, they can cross this part. And the same happens for Vans and for Riblo and for Emisa. If here they are already at 4,000 feet, they can cross this part, because this is the lowest altitude at which it's safe to fly. And the same happens for the arrivals. Let's say that you want to create a sequence here. So in order to create a sequence here, in my opinion, it's better to create a sequence here because you can descend the traffics better. But let's say that you want to descend the traffics here as well. So you can descend the traffics up to 4,000 feet. And I need to also comment that when the traffic is established on the ILS, the minimum radar vectoring altitude doesn't affect them because they are protected by the ILS. So that means that, for example, if you want to descend one traffic to 2,000 feet, you descend the traffic 2,000 feet, they are established to the ILS. And once they are in the ILS, they can descend, even if they cross the minimum radar vectoring altitude point, because they are protected by the ILS. It's not considered a conflict incident. But if you give one vector here below 4,000 feet, then this is a loss of separation because they are flying in a dangerous area. So how do you take all these topics in mind? You take the topic of altimetry, descent, you bear in mind the minimum radar vectoring altitude, you mean in mind the separation that you need to give to the aircrafts. So how do you prioritize? How do you? So there is a general criteria in order to consider which instruction is more a priority than the other. First, you need to give instructions to the traffics that have an imminent separation incident. That means that if traffic is about to crash with another plane, of course, that is more urgent than an arrival on the sequence approaching the localizer. And that means that, for example, one traffic is approaching the localizer and you didn't give the ILS approach clearance. That means that they will cross the localizer, but they won't join the localizer. And that's a loss of time and loss of fuel by the airplane. And basically, you're screwing up your sequence. That means the traffic that are about to cross the localizer, you need with more priority give them the ILS approach clearance. After those ones, it comes the arrivals or sequence that must do an altitude, speed, or heading correction. That means that traffics that are flying super high and you need them to descend a little bit more in order to arrive properly to the ILS, they have more priority than the others. The fourth priority is the arrivals that are already on the localizer. You need to send them to tower, because if you don't send them to tower, maybe they can get a delay in the authorization, and sometimes they need to proceed through a missed approach procedure, and that's a loss of time, loss of fuel, and loss of any efficiency. That's why they are more priority. And then the fifth priority is the departures that they don't have a further climb clearance. When the departures they are departing from the airport, they have an initial climb clearance, because that initial climb, it ensures that the traffics, they won't be in immediate danger if they climb super high. So that means that when the traffic is climbing to the initial climb altitude, you need to give them a further climb clearance. Otherwise, they're going to fly at the same altitude until you give them the instruction. That means that after all those four priorities, the fifth priority is giving a further climb clearance to the departure traffics. And this is the example here. You have one sequence here you have a minimum radar vector in altitude of 2000 feet. So that means that the first traffic that you need to give an instruction is this one, because this one is going to enter below the minimum radar vector in altitude. That means that the priority is here. The second priority, as you can remember, is the traffics that are approaching the localizer and they don't have an ILS approach clearance. That means that the second priority is this one. And here you can give the third priority here, because the traffic is approaching the localizer, but it's at 5,000 feet. So that means that they are going super fast. They are going faster than this one, of course. And also, they may not catch the glide slope if they are very high. So that means that you need to give an instruction to this traffic to descend to a more convenient altitude. The fourth priority can be considered this traffic, which is already on the localizer and probably also descending on the glide slope, because they are not transferred to tower yet. So you need to give them an instruction to contact tower 118.1, things like that, because otherwise they can get a delay in the authorization. If they reach here and they didn't have an authorization, they need to go around. The fifth priority can be this one, because after all this happened, this traffic is going to be at the same situation as this one. So you need to give them an authorization to contact tower. The sixth priority is going to consider this one, because while all these things happen, this traffic is ascending and they are clear to 5,000 feet or flight level 050, but they are already at 3,500 feet. So in 1 minute, they're not going to be able to climb more because you wouldn't give an instruction. And this is a departure. So after that, we will give him an instruction to climb further. The seventh priority, while all these things happen, this traffic is going to approach the localizer. So we need to give an instruction to approach, to basically that they are cleared for the ILS approach procedure. The eighth priority is this one, and the ninth priority is this one. That's an example. Of course, not all the situations are the same, but that could be an example of prioritization of instruction. And let's say, what is the priority to land? What is the arriving order? So basically, traffics that are an emergency or urgency, they are more they have more priority than the non-urgent ones. But also the traffics that come first, that they are closer to the ILS, they are more prior than the other ones. That means that the priority will be this one. Of course, the emergency comes first, and second, it comes the first one who arrives, or the plane that is closer to the ILS, or it has a more convenient path. So that means that the third traffic is going to be this one. So let's talk about separation techniques, basic separation techniques. In the beginner level, we didn't talk about separation techniques. We were only seeing the minimal separation. So here we're going to talk about the actual technique of separating traffics. The reason is because, for example, we have the most common aircrafts in the world are the Airbus 320 and the Boeing 737. And the average passenger capacity of these planes is 160 passengers. Let's say that you have 10 planes under your responsibility. That means that you're guarding the life of at about 2,000 lives. So imagine having 2,000 lives under your responsibility. That means that you have to do super good your job. You need to separate traffics properly to ensure that those 2,000 people are safe at all times. So we were talking about the vertical separation, and the minimum separation vertically is 1,000 feet between one plane and the other. And this separation is the most intuitive, because you can see if one traffic is above the other. It's very easy to see if they are separated or not. So it's the most intuitive, but also is the most reliable, because that means that horizontally you can approach planes closer without risking the loss of separation. And for that reason, the vertical separation is more reliable than the other methods. Let's see one example here. You have a lot of planes here, but of course you don't see the difference of altitudes because it's a radar. But in every plane, you have one label, and that label tells you at which altitude they are. And that label will show you that one traffic is at some point. So how do you ensure that all the traffics are separated vertically? Applying this rule. The rule is that you need to separate this radar into 4, for example, and inside this triangle, this part of the cake, all the traffics that are inside need to be at least at a different level. That means that only one traffic occupying each level. Of course, you can have one traffic here at 4,000 feet and another traffic at 4,000 feet here, but you can't have two traffics at 4,000 feet in the same sector, because that's the risk of losing separation vertically. So in order to apply this separation properly, always ensure that in one portion of the radar, you only have one traffic flying at one level. When you have much more experience, you can do these sections smaller in order to be more accurate in your instructions. For example, instead of dividing it by 4, you can divide it by 16. For example, traffics that are in this small section need to be separated vertically. But you can have one traffic, if you have the skills, you can have one traffic here at 4,000 feet and another one here at 4,000 feet, because they are not in the same sector. But that's essentially how you provide vertical separation in a reliable way. Let's talk about the horizontal separation. As you could see in the previous video, the minimum horizontal separation is 3 nautical miles. And it's the most visual in the radar, because in the radar you can see if the traffics are close to each other or not. So it's the most visual, but it's the most critical, because it's very risky to have two traffic at the same level and approach them. So of course I would recommend applying the vertical separation as well, but in case that you have a specific situation in which you need to provide horizontal separation, it's just ensuring that you don't go to the minimum. If you go, for example, if you have 3 nautical miles, don't approach them to 3 nautical miles. Give 1 extra mile. Let's say separate them by 4 nautical miles or 5 nautical miles in order to ensure that they never reach to the minimum, because then you're risking losing the separation. And then you have the longitudinal separation, which is very similar to the uh, lateral or horizontal separation. And the difference is that it's long-term based. That means that you don't have the separation now, but in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 10 minutes, you will have the separation, because the traffics are diverted into different angles, and that means that the separation is created with time. But it's the least intuitive to do, because of course the wind is different at different locations, and there are other factors like speed, altitude, and everything. So it's the most difficult to do, but also is one another tool. So what is the general advice to a proper separation? That all separation techniques, that means vertical, horizontal, and longitudinal, should be provided simultaneously. That means that you provide horizontal and vertical separation at the same time, not just one, unless there is a specific case in which it's better for you or more convenient to you to just apply one. So you need to create these separation techniques. You need to provide them simultaneously in order to create an efficient traffic flow. So let's talk about sequencing if we want to finish with this theoretical part. And you remember this circuit pattern that I was showing you in the previous video. So now let's improve it. Let's improve it. And now we're going to talk about the time-based sequence. That means that you're controlling the ground speed of all the planes, and you have a traffic flow, but also in a reliable way, because then you have the traffic arriving uniformly. So let's consider this leg here, which is a bit separated from the final path. So the downwind part, let's call it the downwind part. You have 2 minutes separation, and for example here in the final path you have 1 minute separation. That means that 1 minute, in 1 minute, one traffic from this leg is going to come. The other minute, the other traffic from here will come, and like that you can organize the flow of traffics arriving from both legs. That means that you need to use the speed indicators. In the Endless ATC, you have usually one line that tells you in X minutes, for example, let's say 2 minutes, in 2 minutes where the plane is going to be. So if it tells you where the plane is going to be in 2 minutes, you can apply those lines in order to separate the planes. That means that the beginning of that line needs to be just at the end of the other plane. And like that, you ensure that you have sequences of 2 minutes. This is what happens when the traffics move. That means that they are separated by time, and of course, like this is better than just separating by distance. And in order to achieve that, you just need to ensure that all traffic maintain the same ground speed, because it's the speed in relation to the ground. So after explaining this, let's go to the practical part. Of course, let me remind you that you need the pro version. Let's go to the Frankfurt Airport, EDDF, and I will show you a bit the interface before going straight to the practical part. I hope you enjoyed the theoretical part, and see you on the next level. Hello guys, welcome to the practical part, and we are here in Frankfurt. So I'm going to show you the interface in more detail. Here of course we have some departures here, but we will initiate another session, so that's not a problem. We're going to start seeing the airport case. The airport case, of course, this is with the radar. Here you have some instructions that they usually give you. Also you have here information regarding the session. And let's start here with the range rings. Those are the range rings. Usually they have 5 nautical miles separation. And here you have the navates that are in the area. I don't know exactly the name of the navates. So yeah, basically here you have the indicators of the navates. Then here you have the indicator of the minimum radar vector in altitude. In this case, everything that is outside this shape is 3000 feet. In this area here, the minimum radar vector in altitude is 4000 feet, and in this area here is 5000 feet. So we will need to bear in mind this. Here we have the traffics. This is the ILS. The traffics, usually the arrivals they are green, the departures usually they are purple. So after I showed you the radar, because it's quite easy, after I'm going to tell you what is inside the labels, because we need to read properly the labels. Let's go here to this ribbon. If we didn't select the menu here, let's say that we click inside the map, Here we have the statistics of our session. Here we have how many plays we have in control, how many landings we did, how many missed approaches, go arounds, which is basically the same. Like um, zero diversions in case that we were super late. The planes they diverted to another airport. And very important, here's where you see the separation incidents that you had. And here is the highest score, elapsed time since we started the session, and this is the name of the program. Let's start again the session because we have a lot of planes here. So the reason is to not to provoke any separation incident. So let's go back to the airport. Here you can select the airports available. In this case, you have Amsterdam, London, Heathrow, Frankfurt, Atlanta, Paris, Charles de Gaulle. This is JFK. I think it's in New York. Then you have Haneda Airport. I think it's in Tokyo. Then you have I think this is Vancouver, if I'm not wrong, and this is Sydney. So every time that you select one airport, it goes you to that airport. In this case, for this session, of course, we're going to use Frankfurt. So the traffic, in terms of traffic, when you have the normal selected, that means that the traffic increases with time and the difficulty increases with time. And this is automatic. Here you can see the score and you can see the skill. If you click on custom, if you select custom, you can select the skill. The skill means the difficulty, and the capacity means the how basically uh, how many planes you can handle. Usually is the same. When you select flow, I I personally prefer more the flow than the skill, because the skill you can always change it, but the flow is the most important thing, because if you have a lot of planes, you can see flow, minimum flow and maximum flow, and here you can see the description, flow in 60, like 60 planes per hour out and 60 planes per hour in. You can reduce it as well, so you can put a minimum flow and a maximum flow. You can select the option of not departure. That means that you're going to only have arrivals, and you can select the option of no secondary airports, which means basically that you only will have operative, the main airport of this sector. In this sector, we only have one airport, so in this case, this is irrelevant. Let's select again, so we don't have a lot of traffic. Here, when you select speed, it's the speed at which the simulation works. It can be at real time, it can be 4 times the real speed, and it can be 2 times. Of course, for the purpose of this game, we're going to, as soon as it is not boring, we're going to use the 1 multiplier. The sound, I think I already explained it in the previous session, but I'm going to explain it again. So let's talk about the sound. When the sound is 0, that means that you hear no sound, literally. When the sound is 1, that means that you can hear, if there is a conflict issue, you can hear the traffics ring like na 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 na, but the traffics, the pilots, they don't speak. When the sound is 2, the pilots, they speak, but they don't read back. And when the sound is 3, it's everything basically. For the purpose of this game, we're going to put just sound 1. The display, in this case, is basically customizing the interface. The font, you can select the size of the labels. For example, if you select large, they show large. If you select small, they are small. If you select medium, they are medium. For the sake of this session, we're going to select small. And the line, I already explained in the theoretical part. The line, it tells you, according to the current speed, where the plane is going to be in X minutes. In this case, it's 2 minutes. But you can customize it 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 0 minutes, so no line. 1 minute, but for the sake of this game, we're going to put it at 2 minutes. The ring, it's what I explained it in the previous level. Basically, there is a safe zone of the plane that is 1 nautical miles and a half. That basically, if you join it with another traffic, one, it breaks the 3 nautical miles rule, they pop up as red. So for the sake of this game, when it's 0, it never shows it. When it's 1, it always shows it. And when it's automatic, it never shows it unless the traffics are close to each other, horizontally. The range ring, as you can see, usually there are 5 nautical miles, but you can customize it as 10, and you can customize it as 0. We're going to put it as 5 nautical miles. The bar left or right, that means that this ribbon here can be left or can be right. The light here, you can make it dark or light. We will put it light. The label is the information that you can see on the planes. When the label is A, you see it like this. You can only see the call sign, the altitude, current altitude, authorized altitude, the speed, the wake turbulence indicator, which is out of the scope of this tutorial. And then you can see the direction at where they are going. You have label B, which is basically only the call sign, and it's popping up all the time. And then label C, you have all the information here without popping up. For the sake of this video, we're going to leave it as C. Contrast, basically seeing the contrast, high contrast, low contrast. So we're going to put it as 1. And lockdown means that you cannot make it you cannot basically zoom the bar. When you have it as not locked, you can zoom it. In this case, we're going to leave it like this, but we will try to not to zoom it. Let's start again on our session so we don't have a lot of chaos here. So let's go for goals. Goals is basically an explanation of basically the different goals that you can reach, but I'm not going to explain this in detail. You can check it yourself. Then the weather, you can customize the weather. If the wind, you want the wind to be calm, in which direction and at what speed. For the sake of this video, we're going to put it as calm. Runway change, in case that you don't like this configuration, you can change the configuration. And for the sake of this video, we're going to use this configuration. 25 left. Then the delay is the time that the pilot is the time that it takes to the pilot to react to the instruction that you say. You can put it as 0 seconds, that means that they do it immediately. You can put 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. For the sake of this video, we're going to put it as 4 seconds. And sweep, it means the time that it takes for the radar to update. For the sake of this video, we're going to leave it as 0.5. full screen, you can make it full screen to make it full screen, and about it just information about the game. So now that we know all the interface and with detail, we're going to start approaching the planes with all the concepts that we already learned. So for the sake of this session, we're going to put the traffic, custom, flow, and we're going to put 45 planes per hour. And also, we're not going to put this because we want the partners. So now that we have everything set, let's start organizing the traffic that is arriving. Here we can see this Boeing 787. By the way, you have the aircraft, like the manufacturer, the model of the plane. You have the speed. Remember, this is the ground speed. This is the indicated speed that you gave them. Sometimes you can see that the indicated and the ground speed are different, but because we already explained that when they're at a different altitude, the indicated airspeed is different than the ground speed. And they are going towards this point. That's why you can see FFM. But for example, if you give a heading of 050, you can see that the direction is 050. And this is the call sign, this is the actual altitude, and this is the authorized altitude. So we're going to do the same strategy as the previous section. We're going to create two downwind legs. So we're going to choose the technique of the circuit, but with more improved thing. So now we have already four traffics. So let's put this first in this case because it's just directly. So let's put it as 3,000 feet. The minimum here is 3,000 feet. So don't forget that. We can send him here to 070, 4,000 feet to avoid any conflict with this one. Expedite descent and speed should 00 because we are very close to the air. Here we can send him here 065 so it doesn't come that close, because in the previous tutorial, in the beginner level, we were approaching this place very close to this layer, so we're going to separate them a bit more. We're going to make this distance longer. As you can remember, the priority is that when we have a departure here, we need to give them a higher altitude, in this case 30,000 feet, and um, faster speed, and they're going directly to the SID. And here we have one traffic at 8,000 feet. We're going to descend him to 4,000 feet because here we have 3,000 feet, but we need to separate them from here. And speed 220 and approve. In this case, we don't matter about this speed because it's quite okay. They are approaching to the localizer, so we approve the localizer. Cleared ILS approach. Now wait, 5 left. In this case, we have this one at 8,000 feet. They are very far from this one, so we're going to put him as 3,000 feet. And actually, we can send him 070 or 060 because it's going to take some time to turn around. Then we have this one that is coming here. We don't have any problem here, so we can send him directly to 13,000 feet and speed 284. Then we have one traffic arriving here. We can send him directly to AIM-TR, Mike Tango Romeo, and then after Mike Tango Romeo to fly heading 100, descend to 5,000 feet because here is the minimum 5,000 feet, and reduce speed to 220. As you can see, this one is already established on the localizer, and this one we need to put him at 200 because we want to make a sequence with this previous plane. As you can see, this one is already climbing. We will send him with center controller, and this one very soon we're going to send him with center controller as well. As you can see here, they're separated vertically, 4,000 feet, 3,000 feet. It's going to take a while to turn to the left, so we can send him directly to 340 or 330, and then in a moment we're going to give him the final vector. This one we can send him 070, descend to obviously 4,000 feet, and reduce speed to 200 knots. This one is coming too direct because we have a sequence of maybe 3 here. So we will put him in the queue. So we can descend him to 5,000 feet, reduce speed to 220, and as soon as possible we will turn him to this pattern. We have another departure, but first of all we will send him to center controller. So center controller, and now yes, we will send him here. Actually, the priority is the opposite. We need to send him first to 13,000 feet and then send him with tower. And we can give already the final vector. Remember, maximum 30 degrees more. So we can give him 260 clear ILS. And here we can already send him to 340 because it's coming after. And after this one is coming this one. So this one is already going to the SID. This one is climbing. We need to be careful here because this one is at 4,000 feet, but there shouldn't be any problem if it climbs fast. So let's send him to 130. This one is coming here, so let's send him 4,000 feet, speed 220, and you have a traffic pattern. You can get him closer, like for example 130, and we need to be a bit careful, but yeah, there shouldn't be any problem. In this case, we will make him to fly a bit more to the southwest, and then we will give him another vector. As you can see, there is no problem with this traffic here because they're separated. Vertically, I don't think that this traffic will find this one, so it's okay. And we will send this one to 70 and clear ILS. In this case, we have this one who is already established, so we'll send him with tower. And we need to be careful with this one because very soon we will need to give him a final vector. And actually, I can send this one here, descend to 3,000, 340, and even 200 speed. We have another departure here. It's going to the south, so we can send him without any problem. We need to be careful a bit with the speeds because, as you can see, there is one traffic here and it's becoming a bit busy. And here we can give, for example, 330, descend immediately to 3,000 feet, and speed 220 knots. So we have this one already. Remember, maximum 30 degrees more. The final course is 250, so we can give 230 without any problem. Find create ILS. I think it's going to be a bit crazy to do this, but I think this one can fit. And this one will send him here again to the queue. Descend to 5,000 to avoid any possible loss separation. 220. This one will send him with tower, and this one is already established. We have another departure, is going to the north. There shouldn't be any problem, so we can send him directly to climb. and very soon we're going to put him in the localizer. Even we can try to put this one in front of this one, so we take profit of the space. Actually, we can put this one behind this one to take profit of the space, and after we put this one. So we will set him directly here, create ILS, reduce speed to 220, and for the moment we need to give this instruction because he's approaching the localizer. 270 create ILS, and that's it. And now we come back to this one and we descend him to 4,000 feet to avoid any loss of separation. In this case, this one is approaching too much. Reduce speed to 200 and turn right heading 060, for example. As you can see, we have already a sequence, and to be honest, this looks much more beautiful than the previous one. So we can send this one with tower, and even send this one with tower. And once this one is established, we can send them with tower as well. This one is going faster than this one, as you can see, 220 ground speed, and this is 209 ground speed. So there shouldn't be any problem because there is 5 nautical miles approximately, but we will see. We can send this one already here in order to avoid a lot of distance, and we will maintain the 220 knots indicated, but we'll give him to this one 200. The reason is because I want to make this traffic to come faster here than this one. But we'll maintain 5,000 feet because this one is at 4,000 feet. And after this one, I'm going to put this one. And after this one, I'm going to put this one. This one is already going at 100, flight level 100. So I will send him with center control. And this one is departing, so I will send him to 130. And this one is approaching already, so I will reduce to 200. As you can see, we have another arrival here. Let's send him here, flight heading 075, descend 4,000 feet, and reduce speed to 20 knots. And here we can send him behind this one, as you can see, and reduce speed to 20 and descend to 3,000 feet. Just to clarify, here we're making the sequence at 4,000 feet, and here the sequence at 3,000 feet. So in case that I reduce the horizontal distance, at least there is vertical separation. That's what we were saying in the beginning of the tutorial. And here, as this one is already a bit distanced with this one, and here you have longitudinal separation, I can descend this one to 4,000 feet. And actually, I can send him to 230 and clear ILS. Remember, this traffic is going this way, this traffic is going this way. So they are longitudinally separated. Because even though now they don't look separated, in 1 minute they will be. And after this one, I will send this one directly. But we need to be careful because this one is coming here. So let's put some longitudinal separation. 060 heading, and let's reduce him to 200. This one is approaching 100, flight heading, sorry. This one is approaching flight level 100, so we will send him with center. And this one is already authorized, so no problem. This was, we need to be careful because very soon we're going to send him with this vector. And this one we will send him to 270. Let's put 275 and clear ILS. This one is coming here, so let's send him to Mike Tango Romeo. And after flying heading 100, reduce speed to 220 knots and descend to 5,000 feet because this here is there is a minimum here of 5,000 feet. And the reason why we do the sequence here at 4,000 feet is also in case that they cross this area, at least they are at the minimum. Let's send this one with tower. As you can see, you saw the pop-up because it's approaching the final path. So let's send it with tower. We can send this one with tower as well. This is already going to the ILS, so let's send this one with 190, so it doesn't go that far. And then with this one, we can send him to 360. You can see that longitudinally, this traffic will be here and this traffic will be here. So they're going to be in line. And also they will be separated by 1,000 feet. So we can approach this one closer. 330 descend to 3,000 feet. Reduce speed to 220, so it doesn't come that fast. This one is already about to descend. So let's send him to tower. And I'm surprised that why we don't have that many departures. I would like to have much more departures, but we need to be patient. So the same him here, we can send him to, actually, let's send him like this. Not directly to my Tango Romeo. Heading 130, descend, reduce to 220 knots, indicate the speed. And descend to 5,000 feet. As you can see, this traffic is flying at 220 indicated, but the ground speed is 240 because it's high. That's what I was explaining before. This one is already in this path, so let's send him 230, clear it ILS, and this one very soon we're going to give him 270. And because of that, we can send this one here 110 and reduce to 200. And then 270, and that's it. And as you can see, this one and this one will be separated because this is at 4,000 feet and this at 3,000 feet. This one we can descend him to 4,000 feet, but we're going to keep him at 5,000 feet because of this traffic. And this traffic we're going to send him more straight to maintain the distance between the downwind and the final part. We have another arrival here. We can send him directly to NTR and then try heading 100. Descend to 4,000 feet and 220. We don't need to worry about this part because after NTR is going to go directly to 100. So this one is already established. Very soon we're going to send him with tower. I wish I could have more departures, but unfortunately, this game is not going that even. But yeah, you could see that the departures are very easy to handle. They just depart here and they go to the initial points, Tobac, Sobra, Aneki, and Ratin. So this one we can send in 065, reduce to 00, and very soon we're going to give this one the final vector. So actually this one will put him in sequence 115, and this one we're going to give him approximately 240, approximately. But we can correct after if we see that it is not working. Then this one we will send him with tower. And this one, actually we can put him behind this one. So we send him reduce to 200, descend 5,000, and clear ILS. Because we will put him behind this one. That means that this one we need to give him a bit more longer path. That means turn left heading 090 and reduce to 00. This one also reduced to 00. As you can see, the range rims are approaching. Let's give him 190 knots, so they are a bit more separated. But in this case, there shouldn't be any problem, because as you can see, 4,000 feet, 3,000 feet. So I think there is no that much to explain here. I'm going to close the airspace, and for that you go to traffic flow and you reduce it to 0. I'm going to put all this traffic in the localizer, and by the way, these traffics are approaching each other, so let's put him to 2 to 0. The reason is because longitudinally they are reducing distance, so that's why I gave this path. This one will circle with tower, and actually I think I will just start putting the planes closer. Thank you for watching this video, and see you in the intermediate.